Hello. So this is going to be a video on how to use chord tones and a very, very basic exercise first of all, and then I'm going to do two more videos that go along with this one. The second one we're going to just look at some chromatic passing notes in terms of chord tones, and the third one we're just going to look at what I call colour tones and how they align with chord tones. The chord tone stuff really is just one of many tools in terms of learning jazz, so this does not replace transcribing, listening to loads of stuff, jamming with other people, all of the rest of kind of things, but this is a kind of one of the things that you want to get right. Just quickly, the best book I think on chord tones and understanding how they are used is Hal Galper, Forward Motion, and how good solos generally learn to align chord tones with the strong beats of the bar, and you need to be able to just play the basic chord tones in order to do that. So, first exercise, I'm going to use the first 8 bars of Autumn Leaves in B flat. This is for any instrument, and I run this with a group of students sort of regularly from year to year, and so this is good for beginners, but also actually good for advanced people just to get back to the kind of basics now and again. So the first thing you want to do is really just play the root note of every single chord. So the chord sequence we're using from Autumn Leaves is C minor 7, F 7th, B flat major 7, E flat major 7, A minor 7 flat 5, D7 altered, and then G minor 7th, and I'm going to put a cheeky G7 dominant at the end of that, okay? This may seem as basic as you could get, but it's very important to learn the root notes. So the first thing we just do is play the root note of each chord. 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Just that, okay? Interestingly, this is something that Lenny Tristano said was absolutely crucial, that you should be able to A, play the root movement of any standard that you're doing, and also be able to sing that, and you should be able to do the melody and the root movement. And you know, like a lot of sax players and lead players don't necessarily play root notes all the time, so actually practicing that is quite a useful skill, however basic it may seem. Second thing is to do the third of each chord. I'll just do that first of all. Now the reason why I'm breaking this up into individual chord tones is that not everyone knows each of the chord tones of their chords. So it might be that if you're playing the trumpet, for example, and I ask you to play the 5th of every single note in Stella by Starlight, you may be able to get some of them, but not all of them fluently. So you really want to be able to actually play each individual chord tone on its own first of all. A lot of people can play the chord tones as an arpeggio. But if you actually get them to then play individually, it kind of stumps them, and it's very important that you do actually know each one. One thing I find quite useful is if you took a progression like Autumn Leaves, is to actually name each of the chord tones. So if I was naming the third of each chord, I should be able to go E flat, A, D, G, C, F sharp, B flat, B natural, okay? That's quite useful, and then to do that on your instrument itself. It also is useful to sing it. So the next one we want to do is the 5th of each chord. Minor, so this is going to be a flattened 5th, and then we've on to 5th. Okay, so those are the 5ths, and we would do that individually. And then the final thing we want to do is the 7th of each chord. Once we've done that, we can then do all of those chord tones in order. So one of the ways to do that is just to kind of give it a little bit of swing and just do something like I demonstrated earlier, just to make sure you can do. Again, very basic, but completely essential. This is the kind of like, you know, the fundamentals. So if this was like calisthenics, These are push-ups and pull-ups, and it's always worth sort of going back to these. Now another way you can do the arpeggios, which is slightly more interesting and starts aligning more with bebop language, is what we call flipped arpeggios, where we can actually play the octave first of all, then go down to the third, then to the fifth, then to the seventh. So we get that. So that's just the flipped arpeggios, and that's worth doing. So you want to be able to, again, just to reiterate, go through each note individually on a chord. This is any standard you could pick. Go through each note individually, and it's quite useful to have a little backing track to do that with as well. So something like the iReal Pro, and just play it at a kind of medium swing tempo, and that's quite a good goal to go for. Once you can do each one individually, then you can do the entire set of chord tones in order, okay, as an arpeggio, and then you can do the flipped arpeggios, and this gets you used to just the kind of general sound of it, but we're not really improvising at the moment. So the next step is we can start improvising. This is an exercise straight from Hal Galper's book, which is to just play minims on every single bar, just playing chord tones. And this for him was kind of like the minimum standard that you should be able to do consistently on any single jazz standard. So if I demonstrate that, it would just sound like this. That's a really good exercise, and you can make that interesting by, for example, trying to do your minims perhaps with an idea of always kind of like moving up, and then perhaps another one where you're trying to move down. You can't always do this consistently, but something like perhaps come down. And also you could do things like just trying to stay as much as possible in the same place in terms of your chord tones, and that gives you a good sort of sense of voice leading. Now, one of the really good exercises to start training that is to alternate thirds and sevenths. Now with Autumn Leaves, because of the way the chord progression is constructed, the thirds and sevenths work really well. So if I alternate thirds and sevenths on each bar, I get this. If I'll start with the third, and then the seventh, notice third, seventh, third, seventh, third, and I could stay on the third, and there I've got a kind of minimal amount of a movement using the chord tones. And then if I flip that round and I start on the seventh of the chord, I'd get this idea. Seventh, third, seventh, third, seventh, third, seventh, third, okay? So these are good exercises, again, just to go through them. Separate chord tones, arpeggiate, flipped arpeggios, using minims and actually just trying out different kind of like configurations of the chord tones, playing minims against a backing track. And then finally, playing thirds and sevenths and alternating them. Now on something like Autumn Leaves, that works really well. On other pieces like Stella by Starlight, it won't give you necessarily a completely smooth kind of move from start to finish, but you will start picking up patterns, because whenever you have a 2-5-1, if I start on the third of one chord, it becomes the seventh of the next chord, third of the next chord. So we're always going to get that kind of like voice leading, which is really interesting. What I can do after that, once I get used to the basic chord tones, is I can start perhaps swinging those chord tones and perhaps adding a little bit of embellishment. What I am doing at the moment in this particular exercise is I'm just sticking with chord tones. I'm not adding any colour tones or chromatic passing notes. So I could do... Notice I did cheat there, and I did play a sixth on the E flat, so I apologise for that. that's the main exercise for the chord tone workout, and you can try that on any single standard. So in the next video, I'm just going to show you now how to progress by using chromatic passing notes to add some interest to that. Thank you.